Hello, guys. Welcome back to the shitcoin.com show. I'm Blake Moore here with Andreas Brecken.
Happy to be here.
And today's guest, you probably know him. We have a co-founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin. Welcome, Vitalik.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time right now, right, for Ethereum. I know there's some crazy developments ongoing. Where are things at right now in terms of ETH 2.0?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest thing that came out over the last couple of days is the first testnet that implements basically the same protocol that we want to implement for the main network has been released. This is this prismatic topaz network, though. And theoretically, we're hoping that we're going to get some other clients and not just a prismatic one. We're hoping to get maybe Lighthouse and some other implementations on it soon. So far, it's been running for about 2 days. I've been running a node. My 32 testnet ether has gone up to about 32.01 testnet ether as of this morning.
Right.
So, yeah, it's definitely a big milestone for us. It's been the first time that we have this kind of running network that's running under basically the same parameters that we want to run under the main network. I mean, there's a couple of kind of very minor differences. There have to be, and it's the main network itself is running under slightly different parameters, but in general, this is just the culmination of more than 2 years of research and development and a lot of hard work by all the different client teams, and it seems like it's been running stably.
I still remember where I was when the first Ethereum block was mined back in the day. I mean, it was if you remember that website everybody was looking at, where you could see all the different clients that were connected and whether it was syncing or not, and it was kind of nerve-wracking. How was this one for you?
Yeah, and it's definitely been a bit less nerve-wracking than the first time, just because I've been through the whole thing before. But it's definitely kind of nervous with anticipation, but also just very excited to see all of this stuff finally go live.
Become an early adopter. Sideship.ai.
We were talking a bit today about reminiscing a bit back to the Ethereum 1 white paper and also the yellow paper, and just all the excitement that came with that. But the actual products came much later. I mean, it feels like much of it came last year with the explosion of DeFi and everything, or if you want to count the ICOs, even before that. What do you think is going to get the people who are excited about Ethereum 1 launching? What do you think is going to get them excited about Ethereum 2?
I think and one of the differences between the ETH1 launch and the ETH2 launch is that the ETH1 launch is this kind of big bang all at once, and you can start building kind of pretty much everything immediately. Whereas for ETH2, we're doing things in stages. First it's the proof of stake launching, and then sharding is launching, and then the ETH1 and ETH2 chains will get integrated. And I published that kind of roadmap document on the diagram on Twitter about, I think it was a month ago. So there's, after ETH2, there's still all of this kind of ETH 2.x, right? So we have ETH 1.x, we have ETH 2, and then ETH 2.x is already being planned. So it's more of this kind of phased thing where basically the network just keeps getting better and better over time. So I think it turns out that even before we get kind of full scalability for just every Ethereum application, and the ability to do kind of everything that we've been able to do so far, but at a much higher scale, we'll get scalability for some very specific applications. So rollups, for example, right? Rollups have been this kind of big layer 2 scalability buzzword in Ethereum-land, where instead of having everything off-chain, you have the computation off-chain, but you have something like 10 to 20 bytes of data on-chain for every transaction. and you use, fraud proofs or snarks or some of this other tech to solve the computation part. So the scalability for rollups is actually going to come before scalability for general purpose computation, right? And rollups already, you have things like loop ring running, you have some of these optimistic things running that can theoretically do more than 1,000 or even more than 2,000 transactions per second even now if like literally everyone were to switch to them. But multiplied by sharding, it's potentially even larger. So I expect we'll see a lot of experimentation with roll-up type things coming fairly early. I also expect the proof of stake side to have some benefits fairly quickly. So like one of the examples of that is that the proof of work chain, at least the way that it's been done in Ethereum, has been kind of much less light client friendly than we wanted it to be. And so, you have everyone using Infura, you have all the mobile wallets talking to a server and all of those things. Whereas the proof of stake chain is intended to be kind of much more light client friendly right from the beginning. So and then when ETH1 and ETH2 get connected to each other, then proof of stake on ETH2 will get you this kind of level of light client security on ETH1. So you basically get kind of all of these little features and all of these little benefits that can benefit different parts of the Ethereum ecosystem, and you will expect to just see them kind of slowly turn on one after the other.
If it's much easier to run a light client, do you expect people to make more apps, that run in the web browser, where the user doesn't actually have a full node, but all the information it needs about the blockchain it receives, any communication channel in the browser like WebRTC or anything like that?
Right. So MetaMask exists already, right? And MetaMask has this kind of browser extension that is this kind of what we sometimes call a zero client. It's basically like you hold your private keys, but all the blockchain information is coming from a server. And that's been a huge boost to just usability of Ethereum applications. And I'm definitely hoping that things like MetaMask will be able to be proper light clients instead of just hooking up to Infura over the next year or so.
And what are you going to do with your miners? Maybe as a divider in a bookshelf, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of use cases for computing power for very structured computation. First of all, I know a lot of gaming communities have hated us for the last couple of years just because we took from gaming. But maybe if there's less miners, then the gamers will be happy again, and we'll see a lot of cheap hardware coming in. Another option, kind of closer to the crypto space, and look, this is definitely not going to get 100% of the miners. Like you might get a few percent at most, but zero knowledge proofs. So there's been this huge kind of quiet technology revolution happening with zero knowledge proofs being much more useful for everything. And you have like Plonk and Starks and Snarks and Lookup and all of these kind of alphabet soup inventions. And they're very powerful, right? Because first of all, they give you a lot of privacy, but second, they give you a lot of scalability because instead of verifying a really big thing, you just have to verify a really small proof. And you can use them to verify validity of things. You could potentially use them to replace Merkle trees, cut the Merkle branches and witnesses down from hundreds of kilobytes to like a couple of kilobytes, and all of these nice things. But the proofs often take a lot of time to generate, right? And so I think, yeah, like even like if you look at Zcash, right? If you
I was about to say Zcash. I think I've made it almost a ritual that I think like every year since Zcash launched, I just say on Twitter like, Zuko, when can I make transactions from my phone? When's that happening? I'll take delegated. I'll take anything.
Yeah. So and I actually did get a chance to see one of the light clients that the mobile phone clients that people in the Zcash community have been working on, and I managed to sign a transaction from a phone and send it. And even in Ethereum, right, like you have Tornado.cash, which is basically using kind of Zcash style zero knowledge proof technology for an Ethereum mixer. And Tornado Cache itself is all written in JavaScript. It's a basically static web page, right? And I actually tried it from inside of Status, and Status is this kind of mobile phone Ethereum client plus browser plus chat application. And it turns out I was able to send an anonymized transaction from inside of Status on my phone. So it does take like maybe 10 to 20 seconds to prove instead of like 2 to 3 on your computer, but it's totally possible. And I'm definitely expecting it'll keep getting better.
If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to sign up to our newsletter at shitcoin.com/newsletter.
And I wanted to ask you as well. So there's been this explosion of financial applications, right, on Ethereum. But what do you think are the most interesting applications that are coming out or in the pipeline in other sectors?
Yeah, very good question. So, I mean, first of all, ENS continues to be important. Just decentralized domain names and kind of decentralized usernames in general. So Status uses ENS for its kind of usernames because it's trying to do kind of very good UX decentralized messaging without needing kind of any kind of server for anything. So if the company disappears tomorrow, it'll keep on running. And there's definitely a lot of nice use cases for kind of non-financial tokens, whether it's a kind of proof of participation at different events, whether it's tickets for different things, kind of virtual game items and all of these things. And there's a lot of benefits that you can get from kind of combining together the financial aspects and the non-financial aspects of a lot of these applications, and kind of being able to just buy NFTs of just in a single transaction on chain and all of these things. In the kind of financial but not just token sphere, auctions I think are interesting. And I think different kinds of decentralized organizations are interesting. And I know there was kind of the DAO back in 2016, and there's a lot of kind of different examples of similar and not so similar things that have popping up more recently that try to do things more carefully. And in general, coming up with better ways to just build and run and make kind of organizations that properly take advantage of just the ability of many different people to participate that the internet gives us that wasn't available before is definitely a big interest of mine. And we've been seeing a lot of different people trying to do things. Some of them end up just not being particularly better than anything that came before. Some of them are breaking, and some of them I think are actually genuinely interesting. And like the Gitcoin grant stuff I think has been interesting, and some of these kind of Ethereum ecosystem DAOs like Moloch DAO and Marketing DAO and a couple of others, and they're very interesting experiments, and it's been interesting to kind of see them run as a complement to things like the Ethereum Foundation and some of the other big players in the space.
Do you, so I remember back when you released the white paper for Ethereum-land and also the technical paper. I remember because I printed out all of it and all the references, and I think I read it on the beach. This is probably why my friends think I'm crazy. But the stuff that crossed my mind when I was reading that was, and especially a lot of the influence from Nick Szavo's work, was the ability to make machine-to-machine payments. Like I was thinking stuff like, you're on a highway, there's a lot of traffic. If the cars can pay each other and they can communicate the preference, like I have to arrive very soon, or I can arrive pretty much anywhere, you can solve traffic congestion. And that was the first one I thought of. There's unlimited amounts of these machine-to-machine payments. Do you think that's going to get any traction anytime soon?
Yeah, I definitely think kind of those kinds of applications are very cool. And I think the biggest challenge in kind of deploying them quickly is just that it's not a pure software problem, because you have to actually kind of talk to the people that are building the machines and get them to support all of this stuff. So yeah, it's not the sort of thing that kind of a couple of hackers can just put together in 4 months and get people to start immediately using it. But in the longer term, I think that kind of stuff is definitely extremely promising. And I think there's a lot of things that we could do with payments that we have just not been able to practically do before, just because existing payment systems don't necessarily make it very easy to receive money in many cases.
And I guess once you start making combinations of financial products and prediction markets, you can get some really wacky DAOs. I mean, you could sort of run an investment fund that uses a prediction market to gather its data or anything like that. Have you been using prediction markets much, or what do you think?
Yeah, and I definitely kind of pop into things like Augur and some of the alternatives every once in a while and see how they're doing. They're definitely getting better and better. And I think one of the challenges is just that kind of the UX has to be good, and you have to get to the point where you have enough of a liquidity so that if you buy and sell, you're not taking a 10 to 20% hit or whatever. And I definitely think things are kind of slowly improving, and I even think that like some of the work that's happening in decentralized exchanges with Uniswap and I forgot the name, but the new Gnosis one, I mean, all of that's definitely going to kind of roll over into these decentralized prediction markets and improve things there. And I've been a fan of those kinds of things for a while. I mean, decentralized like prediction markets, and then kind of deposits and of insurance and all of these adjacent things, and I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's I guess I'm a little influenced by listening to Paul Stort so much about this, but the possibilities of a prediction market is even wider than I thought. Once you start doing once you start crossing them, so you can actually get people's voice on what is the best decision.
Shift with side shift AI. Good job.
So I saw you been tweeting a little bit about marketing and its place in crypto versus not versus but complementing tech. How are you going to pull in people in the wider crypto community into ETH 2.0 that maybe haven't been sold to date with ETH 2.0?
Sure, and I think first of all, it's important to remember that up until very recently, ETH 2.0 was basically kind of an idea and a dream as far as most people could tell. You know, there's a lot of research work happening, there was a lot of technical work happening, but kind of I respect that, you know, if you're someone watching from kind of far away, it's harder to distinguish those kinds of things from vaporware. But I think now that, you know, you have test networks and you can kind of join on and you can try staking, and that kind of brings it closer to reality for people. But also, I think it'll get much closer to reality for people when you actually have kind of an ETH 2.0 live network running, where you know you can at least do things like put data onto the network and have kind of some level of sharding, so you can get scalability for applications that people benefit from. And I think you know, most people at the end of the day are not going to be attracted until there is something that they can concretely use. And I think that's fine. And I think it's actually better for us to not do too much marketing until the kind of the usability and the actual presence of running technology and running networks to back up the marketing isn't there. So and that is something that we've been deliberately trying to be careful about. But you know, when you can use ETH2 together with rollups and some of these other techniques to actually move thousands of payments around and per second on chain, and have all of these and highly scalable and other kinds of applications, then that's definitely something that we need to kind of talk about and kind of bring to people in a way that people can actually use.
Will existing Ethereum 1 contracts, will they work exactly the same once they, once they become relocated to the Ethereum 1 shard in Ethereum 2?
Yes, very good question there. So the roadmap for kind of ETH2 and the ETH1, ETH2 migration has definitely kind of slowly changed over the last 2 years because, we've heard developers' concerns and developers have been wanting smoother transitions. And so the transition that we've been proposing has become kind of smoother and smoother over time. So our current plan for the transition step going from ETH1 to ETH2 and kind of merging the two chains and retiring the proof of work side is basically that we kind of cut and paste the Ethereum-land state root and we take it out of ETH1, we put it into ETH2, and then from then on, the ETH2 chain kind of continues, and in that shard, it basically executes the exact same rules that the ETH1 chain did, right? So the same rules for what transactions are valid, the same rules for how code gets executed, for what effects transactions have. So applications would still work in the same way that they did before. The only difference is that those rules would be implemented by an ETH2 code instead of being implemented by ETH1 code. Now, there is a bit of disruption that the developers will experience. So one bit is that during the transition itself, there might be like a period of maybe an hour or 2 hours during which the chain is basically paused. And the second thing is that gas costs for some opcodes might end up going up quite a bit. Basically, like reading the state is currently kind of not expensive enough, basically because ETH2 operates in this kind of stateless model where you need to kind of Merkle prove everything. And so ETH1 currently isn't really designed around that. And there's a lot of things that are kind of cheap because they're cheap in an ETH1 context, but in a context where you need to get proofs for everything, they're really not cheap. And so there's some operations that would get more expensive than they are today, but generally that shouldn't affect kind of regular applications that much.
And how expensive are operations that involve cross-shard communications going to be?
Yes, so in terms of gas cost, not more expensive by much. In terms of latency, basically you will have to wait one slot for something that starts on one shard to finish on another shard, right? Basically because what you would have to do is you would have to kind of perform an operation on one shard, then the operation on that one shard creates this Merkle branch, it creates this receipt, then the receipt gets copied over into the second shard, and then you have to kind of include it in the second shard, and that can only be done in the next slot. So there is that delay, but in terms of actual gas cost, it's not much more expensive than doing things within one shard.
I can see that getting involved on the ETH2 testnet is possible now via prylabs.net /participate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested in getting involved in that as a developer, I suggest you head on over there and start testing it out. And remember to follow Vitalik. You probably already are if you're in this space on Twitter at Vitalik Buterin. Thank you so much again, Vitalik. It's been great. Really appreciate your time.
Vitalik.